So what kinds of facts and circumstances would support that, or do arbitrators look at? Well, they look at the pre-merger carriers' economic health. How do they compare to one another? What kinds of equipment, routes, working conditions, and opportunities for job security and advancement would have existed at each carrier if the transaction had not taken place? And I want to tell you that the corporate structure of the transaction is really not as important as the substantive economics. For example, whether the transaction is accomplished by a merger or an acquisition is really far less important than what are the substantive economics as you compare one carrier to the other. And only when sufficient factors weigh in favor of one group will arbitrators give that group some competitive advantage in the integration process. Now, another way that parties and arbitrators evaluate the results of a seniority integration method is to look at the overall employee group's relative seniority or percentile ranking on their pre-merger lists as compared to the combined list after integration. Now, relative seniority is simply an individual employee's place on the seniority list when compared to all other employees on that seniority list. So let's use a simple example. If there are 1,000 employees and you're number 500, then you're in the 50th percentile on that seniority list. Now, the reason that arbitrators look at that is because it's one measure of an employee's system-wide bidding power. And so if the relative seniority and percentile ranking of the groups hasn't changed or changed only slightly up or down, then the integration method is having a neutral or minimal effect on their seniority ranking and their system bidding power, even though their absolute seniority number changes could be large. Because as you can imagine, when you combine two groups, only the top person on one of those lists is going to keep their original seniority number. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of changes to seniority numbers. So arbitrators look at what does that really produce? What does an integration method really produce in terms of changes to bidding power? Now, your committee's website will have some more detailed information on percentile ranking and how you can calculate yours. So be sure to visit the website. So based on all the facts and circumstances of a transaction, arbitrators have ordered seniority lists to be integrated in lots of different ways. They've used seniority, length of service, or date of hire as one way that they've integrated lists. They've used ratios, either part or all of the list, or some combination of these methods. Now let me point out to you that if an arbitrator or the parties were to decide to use length of service or date of hire as the method of integrating the lists, they ensure that the groups are being compared on an apples-to-apples basis. So for example, if there's disparity in how training is credited, they'll make sure that they correct that disparity. It can be corrected a variety of ways. They might give one group credit on an average basis of how long training might have been. They might give them their actual training days, restore them to them if it doesn't reorder their list and they have the records to establish it. They might actually take training days away from one of the groups. It's to get them on an even footing. Your committee has already told you that they will ensure that the Delta flight attendants get credit for their training time.